Hey, this is day 2 of our 2.3 lesson. In this lesson, we will be working with graphing the Y-intercept form. So yesterday we worked on identifying the parts of the Y-intercept and getting comfortable with pulling the information that we needed. Today we're going to go ahead and work on actually graphing these lines. So students will use the slope-intercept form to find the slope of a line as well as graph the line. The standard is 8EE6. Page numbers out of the hardcover book are 62 through 67, and then out of the practice journal, it's pages 33 through 36. Okay, so our slope equation review, first of all, our slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, where m is representing our slope, and b is representing our y-intercept. So the one thing that I do want to point out is we won't always have a plus sign here, which in my first example, you'll notice that when I do this, it does end up being a negative. The reason being is because they could write it out, like for example, on the one that I have on the screen here, we've got 7x minus 2. They could write it out as, 7 over 2x minus 2. They could write that out as 7 over 2x plus a negative 2, but having those two symbols right next to each other is really confusing, so they guys leave that plus sign out if our y-intercept is a negative. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and jump right into this. Okay, so as I look through this sample, I'm gonna see if I can get this to scroll down a little bit. I'll just move my graph up. As I work through this sample, you'll see that I've got y equals 7 over 2x minus 2. So yesterday we worked on identifying which of those was the y-intercept and which was the slope. So when we solve these, we always have to start with the y-intercept. That is going to give us our first point. So like last week when we worked on graphing slopes and they would give us a point on the graph and then we would go through and follow the slope and create the line. Well, now you're having to do the extra step of finding where that point is. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to identify our y-intercept, which is at -2. So on our y line, which is right here, we're going to go to -2 and we're going to put a dot. So there's my first dot. Now it's just like what we did last week. It's just we have to understand that 7 over 2x is our slope. So I'm going to go ahead and follow this slope of 7 over 2x right here. So I'm going to go, since it's positive, I'm going to go up 7. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and over 2. 1, 2. Here's my new dot. Okay, so there's the 2 points that I'm going to connect to create my line. Okay, so here's the line that I just created. Now, back in section 1, we would go through and we'd pick numbers for x, we would substitute in, we would solve the equation, and then we would do our coordinates. Well, now I'm teaching you a method that you can use without having to do all of those additional steps. And it's basically a 3-step process. Find your y-intercept, follow your slope, and connect your 2 points. Okay, so we're gonna do just lots and lots of reps with this. Okay, so here we've got our next one. So I have -6x plus 3. So -6x plus 3, I'm going to start here. So I need to identify where +3 is on my y-intercept. So here's my y line right here, and I'm going to go find +3. So here's +3 on the y line. So there's my first dot. Now I'm going to go ahead and follow the slope, and the slope was -6. So I have to remember that when it's -6, it's really -6 over 1. So since it's negative, I'm going to go down if my graph is big enough, and I'm still going to go to the right on the run. So I'm going to go down 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and over to the right 1 and put my dot. Okay, so there's my 2 points, and now I'm going to go ahead and connect that. Okay, last week what we did is we were giving 3 examples of points that would fall on that line. Now we can go ahead and get away with doing 2. Sometimes if my 2 points are really close to each other, I might continue that pattern of the slope just to make sure that my line gets nice and perfectly straight. Okay, so let's go ahead and try another one. So here's our next one. I have 6/5 x plus 1. So we start with our plus 1. Okay, so here's our +1, and we're going to go to +1 on our y line. So here's +1, put our dot. And now I'm going to go ahead and follow the slope. So this time I have a positive 6/5. Well, if I go up 6 from my point that I just made, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's going to put me off the chart. And then I'd have to go over 5. So I could choose to do that. Sometimes I get concerned with doing that because if it's not exactly where it should be, it's going to slightly throw my line off. So I'm going to go ahead and do like we did last week where we work opposites. Okay, so since it was a positive and my graph that I'm currently using is not quite big enough, I'm going to go ahead and instead do down 6 and to the left 5. So if I go down 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 puts me at -5. And now I'm going to go to the left instead of the right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's where my dot would be. Okay, if I had gone up into the right, you'll notice I'm one box past and then to the right 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It should fall somewhere in there. And that looks like it's pretty lined up. The problem is if I don't do a very good job of getting that, it's going to slightly throw my line off. So I'm going to go ahead and do my line between these two that I know for sure are right. And you'll see that when I connect these, see how I was slightly off? I didn't get exactly on that point. It slightly changed my, it slightly changed the slope of my line when I was trying to kind of guesstimate where it would be. So that's why it's important that you understand that you can work backwards if your graph isn't big enough. Okay, so let's go ahead and try some more. Okay, so you guys should have your whiteboards out so that you can work off of graphing these slopes as I'm doing them, because then you're going to do some on your own. So here's our first one. We have y equals 3x minus 7. So we're going to go ahead and start where? With our y-intercept. And remember, it includes the symbol that is in front of that number. So we need to find -7 on our y line. So -7 is right here. Okay, so now our next step is to do the slope, and our slope is 3, which we have to remember that that's really 3 over 1. So we're going to rise 3 because it's positive, and we're going to go to the right one. So 1, 2, 3 to the right one. There's my dot. Now this is where I'm saying, see how those are pretty close to each other? If you want to continue that pattern off of that dot that you just made, just so that you can make sure that your line is nice and perfectly straight, you can do that. So I'm going to continue it one more time. I'm going to go up 3 from this dot that I just made. 1, 2, 3 into the right one. Okay, so now I feel like I can get a better line off of that. Now I'm going to go ahead and connect it. And you guys should be using your straight edges and then put arrows on both ends. Just identifying that that would continue forever. And if I continued the slope, you would see that it would fall back on that line again. Okay? I want you guys to try this one on your own. And then I will go ahead, I'll go ahead and graph it in just a few minutes. So go ahead and pause your video and work out on your wipe-off board doing the y equals -4x minus 2. So go ahead and pause your video, do that, and then start it back up to check yourself. So you should have ended up with a line that looked like that. Notice how it's a negative slope. And if I check the slope, it is 4 over 1. And we started at -2. Okay, so that's working with basic equations where they give us everything in that y-intercept form. But unfortunately, they're not always going to do that to us. So sometimes they're going to give us ones where they're a little more complicated. So here's our first one. We have y plus 4 equals -3x. So we need to work to get it to say y equals. So we practiced these a little bit in lesson 1, and we're going to continue to practice. It's just that today we're going to go ahead and graph that. So now if I want to work to get y by itself, we would say -4. because we're trying to get it to say y equals. And remember, we have to put it behind here. So now I have y equals negative 3x minus 4. So now we're going to go ahead and graph that. So we'll go to the negative 4, put our dot, and then follow our slope. It's negative 3 over 1. So I have to go down 3, 1, 2, 3, and over to the right one. 1, 2, 3, over to the right one. So I chose to do it a second time just because those dots are pretty close to each other. Oops. And there's my line, and then I'm just going to go ahead and put my arrows on it. So that's what your line should look like for that one. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and give you one, and I want you to work to get y by itself. Okay, so on this one, go ahead, pause your video, work through the equation to get it to say y equals, and then graph that equation and check yourself in just a minute. So go ahead and pause your video now and work your way through this one. So you're going to find y minus 1 equals negative 2/3 x. So solve for y. Oh. So you should have gotten y equals negative 2/3 x plus 1, and then your graph should look something similar to this. Okay, so here's a couple where I just wanted to go through and work with you on understanding the difference between identifying the x-intercept and the y-intercept. So I'm going to jump back a couple slides just so I can review it or go through with you what that means. Okay, so y-intercept we should be very comfortable with. The y-intercept is where it crosses the y line, and you guys have been identifying that already. Well, now what they're going to do is sometimes they'll have us graph a line, and then they'll ask us for what the x-intercept is. Well, the only difference is instead of identifying where it crossed on the y line, we're going to identify where it crosses on the x line. Now, when they do these, whenever they give these to you, they will be like perfect numbers. So it's not, you're never going to have one where it falls in between two numbers. It'll fall exactly on a number on that line. So when I look at this one, if I look at my red line, on the red line, the y-intercept is right here. So it was at positive 6. And on the red line also, my x-intercept happens to fall right here on positive 3. So that would be my x-intercept. Okay, the purple line. So on my purple line, my y-intercept is right here. And that's at negative 6. And my x-intercept is just where it crosses the negative line. So that's right here. That's at negative 8. So that's just identifying x and y-intercept. So we're going to go ahead and practice a couple of those where they're going to have us actually graph the equation. Get to the right slide. Whoops. I went a few too far. Okay, so when I go through and I look at these, first of all, I'm noticing that I have a decimal number for my slope. Okay, so anytime you have this happen, it doesn't mean that we can't graph it. And no, we don't have to go through and figure out what 0.4 is. What we're going to do on this one is we're going to have to change this into its fraction form. So when I look at that, I see it as negative 1 4/10 originally. And you won't get these very often, but every so often they will. And I always have kids that get really confused on these because they're used to either a fraction or a whole number slope. Okay, so now when I look at this, I could reduce that down just so I don't have to work with such big numbers and graphing. And when I do that, I could reduce this down to negative 1 2/5. Okay, so now I'm going to have to actually change that to its improper fraction. So remember how to do that as we go. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 2 is 7. So now I have y equals negative 7 over 5 x minus 1. So now we can go through and actually work on, let's go ahead and graph that. And then the question is asking, identify the x-intercept. So yeah, we're combining things that are a little more difficult and asking a new question. So I'm going to start at -1, put my dot. So -1 is right here. And then my slope is negative 7 over 5. So I'm going to go down 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and over 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's my second dot. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put my line through this. And hopefully, bear with me because I got to straighten out my line a little bit. It should fall through one of my numbers there on the x. Okay, so when I look at this, here's my x. Here's where it's crossing the x. So my final answer on this would be the x-intercept, because they wanted us to graph it, but they also want us to tell the x-intercept equals -1. Okay, and it's not always going to be the same as the y-intercept. It just so happens that it did on this one. Okay, so let's try another one. Okay, so this time, oh man, once again, they're going ahead and giving us a more complex equation, but they're asking us a new question. So it's still finding the x-intercept. So I need to get rid of this line really quick and erase my graph. Okay, so once again, we have to work to get y by itself. So +4, goodbye, +4. So now I have y equals -3/5 x plus 4. Okay, so we go to +4, put our dot, and then we follow the slope. It's -3 over 5. So down 3, 1, 2, 3 over 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's my other line, or my other dot. And now I'll go ahead and connect those and see where it crosses the x-intercept. Okay, so when I look at that, it crosses the x-intercept right here. So that would be at +7. So our x-intercept equals 7. All right, so let's try one of those independently, unless it gives us a funky, no. You guys are gonna go ahead and pause your video and work your way through this one. Okay, so you're gonna have to solve for y first of all. And then once you solve it, graph and tell me what your x-intercept is. So find the x-intercept. So go ahead and pause your video, work your way through the graph, and then identify where it crosses the x line. Okay, so you should have ended up with your x-intercept being -3. Now, if your line was slightly off, it may have looked like it was between -3 and -4. But I would know from your answers that you had approximately done it right. So this is where it's really important that you're trying to get those dots perfectly lined up when you're doing your straight edge. All right, well, I think that's it for this part. Let me double check. Yep, because that's another day. So that's it for this lesson. So good luck with this one. Keep plugging away at those. And remember, always start with your Y-intercept and then follow your rise over run.